Development Bank PLC. She has over 20 years of experience in formulating and implementing monetary policy and fiscal policy in the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Dr. Roshan, I would like to welcome you to the podium.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to this event. I have the pleasant task of presenting the case for this Women's Policy Action Network and the expectations for this network, and specifically to invite you to be a part of this network that we are launching today. So what is the Women's Policy Action Network? Firstly, it's a policy group, so we really want to see some action. One of the main reasons why we've thought we need to take on this issue at this point. Also, we have seen recently, migration has been happening over a long period of time, but right now we see a huge migration of workers, including women, for various job opportunities. A lot of them are in unskilled work, but also in skilled work. And this is going to have a huge impact in terms of the availability of labor going forward. And when Sri Lanka, if we want to get out of the crisis, basically, we really need to tap this, we can't lose this labor force. And that's the last point of why we need to do it now, is because if Sri Lanka is going to get out of the crisis, we need to better utilize the scarce resources we have. And currently, it's actually more than 50% of our human resources who are women, and they are heavily underutilized. So that's the other reason why we thought and we decided to have this network in order to empower women to come back into the labor force. So what does the network hope to achieve? Well, you say there are so many agencies, so many individuals working in this area. But we felt that bringing everybody together and consolidating efforts, we could create greater awareness on these issues and also amplify the voice that we have as a collective for policy reform in this area. So I think that is the main focus of this, is to bring everybody who's been working in this area together. And if you are to have any meaningful change, we have to see legislative change as well. We know there are archaic laws. I think Shiromal alluded to some of those, or specifically mentioned some of those. We have archaic laws that prevent women from actively participating in the labor force. So we need to have that legislative change. And this will require champions within Parliament to actually champion these reforms. So we hope to be sort of the bridge between civil society and Parliament to ensure that these reforms actually go through Parliament and get legislated. And finally, we want to actually see meaningful change, not only in the laws, but also in practice. And I think Shiromal kept talking about attitudes, so that we actually see this meaningful change in workplaces, in terms of being role models to encourage other women to participate in the labor force, and getting more women into positions of decision making. And I think the Deputy Ambassador talked about that. Because unless there are more women in decision making, it's going to be very difficult to really change some of these things that we're talking about. So what are the real objectives of the network? One is to basically, we want to conduct research and collect the research that is out there in terms of the key barriers that women face in terms of empowerment. And secondly, to create a platform for all our network, so our different stakeholders, which are from the parliamentary caucuses to the representatives from the Ministry of Women's and Child Affairs and all the other ministries that deal with these issues, for the private sector, chambers, civil society, think tanks, and get them all on one network so that we can all come together and create this sort of voice for change. But specifically now, what we want to do is, so based on some of the initial desk research that we did, as well as we had some interviews with some key personnel, we identified 3 main areas that we feel would have that actually they came up with, would have the biggest impact right now in terms of empowering women in this current economic environment. So the 3 areas were basically because one, I think again, Shiromal talked about it, about care work. Globally, it is, there are statistics that show that women basically spend more time on unpaid care and domestic work, which basically inhibits their ability to engage in paid economic activity. Shiromal gave the statistic of there 30% or thereabouts, 1/3 of women are in the, or 33% of women are in the labor force. And the question was asked from the balance who are not in the labor force, what is the main reason for why they were out of the labor force? And the main reason was because they had care, either care of children or elderly care and domestic work, which prevented them from participating in economic activity. So that is one area that we have to address. How do we make it, create an enabling environment for women to be able to go to work while making sure that their responsibilities in terms of care, the responsibilities in terms of care are managed and also shared. The shared responsibility between the man and the woman is actually enabled. Second one is in terms of nighttime work. Again, I think Shiromal referred to that because I think it affects her industry as well, tourism, but it affects many industries. And the restrictions that it places, it basically limits the choice of work that women can do because it limits the time in which they can work. And as a result, and also it limits their earning capacity because they can't do overtime, etc. So I think that's another area that really needs to be addressed. But while doing that, yes, there are other infrastructure issues that also need to be put in place. And thirdly, of course, it's part-time work. Since the reality is that women do bear greater responsibility for care, but the ability, if they had the ability to do part-time work or flexible work, it would basically greatly enhance their ability to stay in the workforce. However, the current laws, the way they are, do not favor such arrangements. And employers are reluctant to really hire. So basically, that is kind of what we are focusing on. And how can you help us in this? Or basically, you are vital for the success of this network and delivering these outcomes that we have just set out by basically being advocates for these areas that we've identified as barriers to women. So we want you to be advocates for that. Be part of the implementing of these policies and reforms that are made, because some of you are in positions of leadership and you head certain organizations, you have access to people who are in positions of leadership. So actually ensuring that these policies are implemented to raise awareness, because again, that is one area. It's not only just having the law, but you have to change the practice and the attitudes towards these gender stereotypes and this gender discrimination. So to raise awareness on these issues and engage in public debates and discussions, and hopefully to use these policy briefs to help legislators to actually champion and to introduce bills that will actually see legislative change and more sort of gender responsive budgeting as well, because to ensure that whatever finances that are allocated are allocated to support some of these areas. So this is our initiative, and I hope it will spur some interest in you, and we hope to see all of you sign up for it. Thank you.